Hi. Today, I'm going to read to you a piece called Can You Tell the Difference Between Science Fiction and Science Fact? It's a futuristic piece, and it was done by Zombie Apocalypse, as he calls himself on YouTube. And it was going around about a month ago. And I wrote to him and I asked him if I could read it online. And he was enthusiastic and he said yes. So here we go, a little late, but better than ever. Can you tell the difference between science fiction and science fact? The years that were 27 and 28, 2027 and 2028. Our weather-beaten planet starts experiencing the worst series of natural disaster our species never could have imagined. All of these being accelerated by a complete breakdown of our jet stream. The torn up patterns are in direct response to the accumulation of 3 consecutive months by which the Arctic became ice-free the prior year. With the ongoing melting of major permafrost regions, we have seen entire towns left abandoned. Huge methane plumes across vast oceans, all the size of football stadiums, continue to erupt every week. By this point, our atmospheric CO2 levels have exceeded 2.8 degrees Celsius over our distant baseline numbers. Enough moisture-laden fuel churning our entire planet into a weather-beaten wasteland. Every continent now being struck with numerous relentless weather anomalies 24 hours a day. An incomprehensible pattern of destructive behavior never ever witnessed in our human history. A series of ice storms in January and February stall out 6 northern European countries. This disaster cuts off the power to 168 million residents. And businesses for weeks on end, and the cost to the EU exceeds 420 billion euros. It turns out that this freakish event was created entirely by a complete shutdown of the Atlantic oscillating current. Unfortunately, that was the low end of the disaster cost. Later in that year, the hurricane season produces a whopping 41 tropical storms, all of them lined up one after the other. 9 of them turning into category 4 to 5, with most of them hitting directly on land. 3 of the storms exceeded the category 6 scale, and all of those also hit their target. Miami, Atlanta, New Orleans, Houston, southern Mexico, Guadalajara, and the entire Cuban island all get completely wiped. A number of these storms linger up north as Cats 3 and 4 and devastate 6 more major U.S. cities. The total bill for these hurricanes ends up costing $930 billion. On the other side of the planet, the Philippines, China, and many other Asian countries get stuck with their share of destructive historic typhoons, causing an additional $890 billion worth of damage. The entire west coast of the US and parts of inland Canada continue to experience severe drought, now in its 8th year, with numerous monolithic wildfires that consume over $225 billion in destruction that year alone. Southern Europe and the Soviet regions also experience historical massive wildfires, burning inside several cities and costing hundreds of billions in damages. While our severe drought continues, we see our world crop production decline by more than 40%. 2/3 of small farms go into bankruptcy. Throughout the entire world food basket, hundreds of billions of dollars in produce have become completely destroyed. Prices triple in the US and Europe, but in most developing countries, the prices become higher than incomes, and that causes major unrest and upheaval, followed by massive migration. Tiny economies become crippled as more than 200 million refugees leave their homelands in search of food and safety. For the past few years, parts of Central and Northern Africa have been slowly migrating north into the Middle Eastern region, while upper-class citizens move up into Europe. We see the same incidents happening in South America and many Asian islands. New restrictions are put into place, allowing people to enter these wealthier countries only if their net worth exceeds $500,000. The remaining millions of desperate lives are forced into refugee camps stretching for hundreds of miles along heavily militarized zones. Over 825 million people leave in a mass exodus over the course of that year. The total cost of all natural disasters, population relocation, and military spending exceeds $7.3 trillion. At the top, all of that on top of a historically severe El Nino that destroyed $2.9 trillion of everything the year prior. Construction materials have now become impossible to find. Businesses all over would continue shutting their doors. This causes unemployment numbers to skyrocket to 23, 25, and 30% in most major cities, if not more. Essential services get cut and taxes get raised across the board by more than 25%. Our already fragile world economy that year enters the worst depression in history with a 43% unemployment rate and massive amounts of hungry and homeless people. Then suddenly, on an early morning, late in November 2028, it all comes to an abrupt halt. The world's stock markets all drop by an unprecedented 80%. The markets never return the next day, the next week, or the next month. Everything just stopped working. Grocery store, no more gas at the gas pumps, and no more running water from our taps. A complete and total collapse of the world economy. By the time 2028 had finally come to an end, with another series of historical severe winter storms, many populations quickly begin to unravel. Hundreds of thousands of people start to die every week from starvation, lack of shelter, disease, war, and accumulative natural disasters. The world population now begins its depletion process. Millions die at first, then tens of millions, then billions. The handful of super rich individuals consolidate their wealth and purchase big protective armies for themselves, while the rest of us try to survive in communal fortresses, fighting every day for our existence. Then, look it! And we destroy ourselves with a few hundred nukes. This causes a nuclear winter and cools down the planet. Somebody send this to Donald Trump and all of those climate deniers, because this is our future if we don't stop. Have a good day.